live, Mr. Nick Davenport. How's it going, man? You good?
Yes, I'm good. It's good to be on the show.
Yeah. How's life treating you? How's your day been?
Pretty well. I'm in sunny South Florida here. Just had Thanksgiving break, so just been handling business, working on some different moves with the company, getting ready for different fighters and different protocols to put together.
So tell me a bit about your background for anyone that sort of doesn't know who you are. Just give them sort of an insight into what you do and what you're about.
Well, basically, my background, I've been a athlete myself pretty much my whole life. I'm 29 years old. I started probably when I was like four, playing baseball, football, running track, soccer, you name it. But I got real good at track, baseball, and football, and actually went to college for track, where I had a lackluster career. And then I got into psychology as my major, and I loved it. But once I graduated, I said I want to kind of stay in the psych field, but I want to stay in the sports field. But I didn't know how that could mesh. And then while I was working on my master's as a therapist, which I really didn't take too well, I learned about sports psychology, which was a field that's been around for some time, but it doesn't really get too much light. But once I found it, I fell in love with it, and I changed my major to sports psychology for my master's, and it opened up the world to me how mental performance can affect athletes, can affect just life in general.
So that's obviously kind of what made you, to an extent, choose this career path. But what was like the main sort of interest for you that sparked it, where you was like, you know, I want to go down this route, like I'm in the wrong field here?
I guess it would be mental toughness, because sports psychology can encapsulate so many things like personality, burnout, being able to go long durations with low mental resources. But mental toughness was something really stuck to me, being able to persevere, being able to fight off any challenges and adversity. Because in my own like life and career as an athlete and as a person, I faced a lot of adversity. I was at one point as a freshman, I actually lost my scholarship because of academic probation, and I had to work to get that back and my track scholarship. So I've seen a lot of adversity. So I took to it pretty well because it had a lot of research on that topic, and it led me to start my business eventually, dealing with cognitive performance in athletes, and then eventually with just general population.
So did you find kind of, because for your own sort of adversity and toughness and the things sort of you've overcome in your life, is that like kind of what made you attracted to like the psychology of humans as well, in the sense of like people can, you know, what breaks people is like different things. Obviously I could spill my cup of tea and be like in tears, and you may look at me and be like, oh, what's this guy on, like these British guys must love their tea, what's going on, you know? But obviously like trying to understand the psychological aspects behind that's probably quite interesting.
Oh yes, you hit it on the head. It's all about interpreting the situation. There's a method called the ABC method. Basically, A is the event that happens. That's the activating event. So, like I said, spilling the tea. I'm gonna use that example. Now, B is the belief. You can see it as, okay, I spilled the tea. Oh well, I'll get another cup. Or you can take it as, oh my gosh, what have I done? And then C would be how you feel afterwards. Are you going to go into depression, or are you just going to pick up and go on with your life? Now, the T example is kind of far-fetched, but you can apply that same concept to any event. And that separates the greats from the not so great, because it's how they react. Because everyone has adversity. No one in this world, I don't care if you're a millionaire or a poor person, you're going through some kind of struggle. But how do you react to it and carry on is what's going to make or break you.
So with sort of the, say, performance athletes, you know, like the high end, what's their, like, from your knowledge and sort of working with guys in MMA, what's their, how's their adversity like when they lose and stuff like that? Can that like make or break a fighter?
Oh yes, most definitely. I feel like they're at that level. You're more prone to adversity, so it's not like the little stuff's going to get to them. It's more so, I think the more bigger scale things, because a person in a fight scenario, just from the physical standpoint, you're taking a lot of beating impact, so it kind of mentally carries over, because if you can take punches, you can take a lot of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think it's more so from the grand scheme of things of like, okay, is this going to make or break my career? Those are, I think, the things that I've noticed, at least, that is going to be on their plate, because at this point they've surpassed the smaller things. They've been most seasoned fighters been fighting 10 plus years, so they've seen the little minute stuff that a beginner would probably break down for. So it's more so the bigger scale things, I think, that makes it more detrimental.
how do you think Joanna Jacek's going to sort of react to what happened with her and Rose? Because I'm obviously when she lost, she was like in tears about the defeat and that, and me, Phil, Jason, and Paulie Gloves obviously all predicted on our podcast. We thought she was going to win as well, so it was quite a shock. Is that? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to understand like how she might bounce back from that after having a slight breakdown after the loss.
Well, I saw a lot of her interviews post fight too, and it was she was pretty shaken up. And from my opinion, it looked like she was shaken up not necessarily because she lost. It was, I think, maybe more so of it was just that sting that okay, things didn't go exactly as planned. Because everyone knows pretty much in most sports, let alone fighting, no one really goes undefeated, and you can always bounce back. And I've had the pleasure to speak with her at Top Team and see her work ethic. So I'm hopeful that she probably will more likely bounce back with that thirst for more, because like I said, how do you interpret it? Some people take it as a loss, like, dang, am I not good enough? Or you can take it as this wasn't my night, it didn't go as I planned, but guess what? Next time it's gonna be 10 times better. So I think she'll be good.
I mean, touching on fighters still with the like psychological aspect, I think you've kind of got like Conor McGregor's sort of mentality, and then you've kind of got like the Ronda Rousey mentality. And obviously, no disrespect to Ronda Rousey, but when she lost to Holly Holm, it was kind of like, for her maybe it was I can be beaten, which might have like impacted her performance in her next fight. Whereas Conor McGregor seems to lose, like he did against Nate Diaz, get straight back in there and win, and it seems not to mess with his fucking head at all. And I'm just like, ow.
Well, yeah, I agree. The Ronda Rousey thing, like that's a good example of how someone took a loss and it affected how their performance subsequently was. Because, like you said, with Conor, you lose, game over, next fight, or you lose, dang, what I'm gonna do? You start changing things that probably don't even need to be messed with physically and mentally. Now you're starting to be in your own head, which pretty much blocks your performance in a negative way when you start thinking more so than you need to be and just doing what you're there to do.
So when you sort of when you work with fighters, not sort of work with them, when you work with fighters, how do you sort of help them to become more creative with, like their thought processes and fighting styles, etc.?
So yeah, that's where I change up things from the traditional sports psychology methods. Usually a sports psychologist or a consultant would come in and just talk with them and find out, okay, where their minds are, what things like confidence, motivation. And these are all things I definitely look at and think about when I put together my programs. But when I come in, I do it from a physical standpoint, because there's no time in our lives, whether it's in the ring or not, that we're not going to be physically interacting with our body and our mind. So the drills I put together, put them in a stressful state, one, so they're always having an ever-changing environment, which is critical because it's never going to be a constant during a fight. Two, I try to get their reflexes sharper, make them have to simultaneously have to think in different mindsets, so their decision making gets more quicker, because at the end of the day, split seconds make all the difference. We're in a sport of minute seconds that can be the difference between knockouts and getting knocked out. So my approach is to always have them at a point that they're always on their toes and always have their head on a swivel, either as with the apparatus I use, something called Fit Lights. One of the main things I use, and it has them to have to react to these lights that I can set up in all kinds of different patterns, all different kind of ways, assign different tasks to each color. So they're always thinking and being overloaded with information. So when they get to a real fight, processing is that much easier. And therefore they simultaneously get physically better, but mentally their body acclimates, because I use an analogy of a person on a vacation, right? So if you go to a vacation, say, I've never been to London. So I would go to London, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Oh, Big Ben. So I'm getting like all excited about what I'm seeing. But you don't want to be that in a performance, especially a fight. You want to act like you've been there before. So if I can simulate, obviously I can't simulate the fight verbatim, step for step, but I can simulate the reaction. I can simulate the cognitive demand of the fight. So when it does happen, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, what is this? They're going to be like, okay, I've seen that. And they'll be more able to focus on the more smaller details, while the opponent is getting overwhelmed, because they're just seeing a big picture versus seeing small intricacies that can lead to a victory.
Yeah, I mean, I heard from because my friend over here studied sports psychology as well. I don't really know much about it, like, but he was saying his friend. This is not a long conversation, but I'll try and remember it word for word because I don't want to like misquote. But his friend said to him, and obviously I overheard the conversation, and he was saying that how can you measure that like a sports psychologist has an impact on a performer? So, for instance, say Tiger Woods at the Masters gets in a sports psychologist and wins, but then next year he loses because his psychologist changes. Like how it's hard to understand for me how you can like measure. Um, so, like if I go to the gym and lift weights, I notice that my biceps are getting bigger. Do you get what I mean? Like how with like the psychology side, how can you measure like okay, by doing these things that has noticeably changed here on the spectrum.
That's a great point you bring up because I actually was just writing about this on an article I'm working on. And basically, you're right. Most people don't want to buy into this as much because you have to say, where's the tangible data? Because, like you said, a muscle can get bigger, a muscle gets stronger. I can see that. I can feel that. So, what I do, like I talked about the Fit Lights, and they are good because they record reaction times, they record how long it took them to do a task, it records if they were accurate or not. So, that way I can say, a Mark or Dustin, you were at 1.1 second on this drill. We need to get down to sub 1 second, or you're at quarter of a second reaction. So I can always show them their improvements. And that's how we know physically that they are thinking quicker and moving more efficiently and faster. That's the only way you can really truly show that anything's happening. Because at the end of the day, you can't just say, oh, you look sharper. You can, but it doesn't hold too much weight versus saying, hey, you did this half a second faster. And that half a second can mean the world.
Yeah, I mean, putting it in sort of processing it for my mind is the by doing that task and needing to bring it down to under 1 second, and then eventually they do that, and then they're how do I like kind of break it down to explain it is like they do the task and then they do the task again and it's quicker and then they do the task again and it's quicker and then they never hit the first time again, if that makes sense, because they've improved there and you can measure the improvement. And then they that kind of within their fight game, obviously they could punch like because they're reacting to that situation just that a little bit quicker. So the psychology there, the pressure that you put them under, is allowing them to perform under sort of that 1 second barrier. Do you get what I mean? Like it's improving their reaction times. That's what I'm trying to say. By like because I saw your video where they were doing the 50 to 45 and having to tap the light every time they found the number, and I think to myself that makes like good reaction speed and like the processing and building. I don't know, you know the science behind it, but you get what I'm trying to. My point is, I think like that is how exactly what you said is probably the best way to measure it, and then obviously when they go into like a real scenario in the ring, and the reaction happens where they need to just react that a little bit quicker. There you see the result of your work, I guess. I should have just said that in the first place.
Yeah. I could put it a simpler way to put it could be like imagine a picture frame and you only have like say 10 seconds to look at it. Now what we're doing is giving that ability to recognize because you can't see what you're not looking for. So when we're doing these drills, like I said, you become more attentive to detail. So if I show you this picture frame and the first time you look at it, you only saw there's a family there. But the next time you see, you might say the dad was wearing a hat. The next time you see, you might say the mom was wearing pink shoes. But what we're doing is we're trying to get you to see that picture in full the first time. So that's kind of, I guess, the way you can look at it is because when you're in a fight, you have to be able to see these details and be attentive to every movement your opponent's doing or everything that's going on and ignoring other irrelevant tasks so you can execute properly. So I think that's the way you can look at it, getting the big picture the first time.
Yeah, I should have just made you explain it rather than me rambling on. So how do you start to like strengthen the brain as well?
Well, basically, give a little more backstory. I started a business called Mental Muscle Fitness back in 2011. And this is while I was still doing my master's. And it was just a name. It had no relevance to each other. I was just working people out. So I stumbled across some research about in 2015 14 about how the body and the brain work together. And then unfortunately about a year later, my great grandmother died of Alzheimer's. And I looked deeper into how the brain and the body work. And I got this book called Spark by a professor from Harvard, John Rady. And it broke down like very simple, but still scientific on every processes of the brain and how exercise can increase it and how brain performance can go unanimously back and forth with the body. So I said, why don't I take that concept? Because they said exercise and then do something cognitive like reading or learning a language. And I thought to myself, the average person these days is not reading that much. They're not trying to do all this stuff. So I said, why not make the exercise itself the cognition and thinking? So it started off with me just like saying some regular flat cones, soccer cones that were red, blue, green, whatever. And I would assign a number to these cones, like 1 is red, blue is 2, etc. And I would call out the number and have to react to the appropriate colored cone based off the number. So this led up to the basis for my concept. Then I got different technologies that made it more proficient because now I can measure time, because before I couldn't measure time. So basically this led up to where we're at right now with Mind Body One, my current company. Mind Body One is what we call it now.
So what sort of like what other drills would you maybe implement for someone that did just want to improve their remembering skills, for example? So I need to remember a list of 110 items. I can only remember 70 of them at the moment, but I need to get to 110. So how could I train the brain for that, like coincide things or?
Well, yeah, so you don't have to spend thousands of dollars like I did on equipment and stuff. You can take something simple as like playing cards. So for memory, for example, the easiest game, I think everyone across the world has played this game. We call it concentration, when you flip over a card and you find a matching card, and then you have to remember where it's at. So that's the simplest way to do it, but obviously that's not going to help. It's like saying you're running 1 lap around the track. That's not going to do too much for your fitness. So same thing for your brain. So how I would flip it is give yourself different distractors, like have someone saying a irrelevant task in front of you, or maybe when you flip it over, count backwards from 20, so it'll distract your brain before you flip over the other card. So you're putting extra stress on the task of memory, so that way you're actually, just like a muscle, you're loading something called working memory, which is a way to hold information in your head. And basically you're making that harder, therefore it'll get stronger, just like a muscle would if you were to put on more plates on a bench press or a squat. So those are simple ways you can do it.
It's mad because, like, if you think about it, like for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I just flip the card, and then I flip the card, and I'm not in any stressful situation, and it's fairly easy. But then someone comes in and they start like shouting at you or making random noises as you're flipping the cards and putting you off, and then you kind of understand there that how then you can measure it in the sense of, oh well, the first time this person was shouting at me and I was flipping these cards and trying to match them all, I did shit, and now I'm coping with the stress and matching them up and performing better, and that doesn't even bother me. So obviously there must have been some growth there.
Oh yeah, because the thing is, people are your brain doesn't like thinking while under stress. That's why, for example, people who learn CPR and they learn it and then they have to do it for real, a lot of people forget and it goes out the window, not because they're just inadequate. It's just because your brain's sending energy elsewhere, sending it to your muscles. You've heard of fight or flight, and your brain doesn't know what stress is. It just knows something's going on. How we interpret stress is dependent on us. You can say there's a lion in front of me, run. You can say a lion in front of me, let's handle it. Now, depending on who you are and what you got on you, you might do the latter. But so basically, it's all about how we interpret the stress and how we block out the irrelevant tasks and the distractors. Because in any daily task, we're going to have some kind of unbalanced playing field. We never really get that perfect like scenario, in anything we do.
So with sort of fighters, it gets spoke about quite a lot in boxing or whatever. Fighters seem to like fall asleep in, say, like the middle rounds of their fights, or so they'll be beating their opponent for like 1-4, and then like 4-7 they just seem to step off the gas and they get knocked about a bit. They don't really look like they're in there, and then suddenly they come out of their shell again. But how could you like help someone build that? I mean, I assume it's like their attention levels, do you know what I mean? They just like wander off or whatever. How could you help someone sort of build and focus and grow their attention level. So in that task, they are completely focused on it for the sustained period of time, rather than wandering off to Narnia or whatever.
And you may not have a psychology degree, but you just described a term called ego depletion, actually. So basically, that's when your physical and mental resources are low, and that's when you, like you said, you start wandering off. And this is a very real thing. So what me and Phil DeRue, the head strength coach at Top Team, do is we'll purposely put them in a tired, fatigued state, like get their heart rates through the roof, have them do some sled pushes or sprints, so they're tired, and then I'll make them think, because that's exactly what's going to happen in the fight. Your mental supply is drained, and your physical supply is drained at the same time. So by simulating that, it gives them the ability to think and have to react in those situations when in a fight, when you're deep into a fight, when the other guy is starting to finish you off and you're in the point like, okay, I'm tired, and you got to start getting sloppy. You're not as technical. So we do that so you can stay technical under duress, because when it happens for real, you've already been there.
Yeah, sort of keeping you smart when you're absolutely fucked. Because
Yeah.
I've done it like, long story short, I jumped in the sea because I live by the sea, and my whole body, well, actually I don't even know if it's relevant now, but I'm going with it anyways. My whole body was like freezing cold, and I was trying to swim, and then I was like fatiguing, I was stressed, and I thought, I'm going to drown here. Luckily my friend come and saved me. But if I'd ever been in a situation where I'd fatigued completely and someone had made me keep thinking and keep reacting, that might have helped me with that process more. Maybe is that kind of the same sort of situation, the same as fighters in an octagon when they fatigue. They're still using their brain and thinking, look, I'm getting smacked in the face here, I need to grab them and not stand in front of them or whatever. We can get quite lazy in our thought processes, I guess, when we're absolutely drained of energy.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the same situation, because, like I stated before, whether it be a fight in the ocean, trying to swim for your life, all your body and brain knows is get me out of here. It doesn't know anything else. Now we actually have the consciousness to interpret that data and be like, this is a guy trying to punch and kick me and choke me. Don't let that happen. Or this is me in the ocean. Let me get out of this. So at the end of the day, everybody just knows danger, stress, anxiety, but we interpret it as such. So yes, you being able to handle that situation prior to that, like in the Navy SEALs, I know for a fact they do a drill where they're purposely have their soldiers underwater for I think 20 minutes, and their scuba tanks, the drill sergeant will purposely rip off the cords and have to tangle them up, and they would have to untangle them and put them back together while underwater without obviously drowning. So they clean them under this stress exposure situation, because not saying this will happen in the actual field, but if it does, guess what? They've been there. Their body is not. Their body is used to it. You know, like I said before, they've been on that vacation, been there, seen that. Doesn't impress me no more.
Yeah, I mean, it's mad that they do stuff like that. I mean, and I think that kind of, in the sense of even like champion fighters and average fighters, it kind of makes and breaks people. You know, if I was in that situation, probably sitting here, I could say, yeah, I'd just drown and just let them take me up and be like, I quit, I'm out of here, like, I'm not doing this. Whereas other people will be like, right on, man, that was fucking cool. I smashed that shit. Did you see when he put it round my neck?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's mad how different people react to different situations. But yeah, obviously, it's that sense of familiarity. I can't even say the word. What is going on with me? Familiarity is the sense of that, and being like, okay, I've been in this situation. My psychologist, my strength and conditioning coach has put me here. I know how I'm going to handle myself here, and kind of almost like using the brain muscle to just, you know, coast to the end of the fight and hopefully see out the victory.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I keep using the muscle analogy because it's so relevant. Like, to get a little scientific on you, when you're whatever you do, whether it's a punch, a kick, running, your brain has to send the electrical impulse to the muscle to activate. And it's like the more times this impulse gets sent, the stronger the connection gets. And there's something I'm sure most people heard of, muscle memory. That's basically the simple term of it. Your body is learning the movements. And the beauty of that is, this is where psychology comes in, and cognition is, you don't have to physically do it. for the muscle to get the signal. Like you can imagine yourself. Like there's a lot of science and research on imagery when you imagine an event, whether it be lifting a weight, a fight, whatever the event is, and your neurons actually still fire the same way as if you physically did it. And you can practice in your head this phenomenon many times. As in real life, you can't practice lifting a weight to a certain extent, or you can't practice sparring to a certain extent until you might get hurt. But in your mind, you're pretty much limitless on how many times you can see it. So it's like, yeah, you physically didn't do the fight or you physically didn't do the techniques or moves, but your body and the nerves have been linked even though you haven't physically done it. So that's a great way to practice. And a lot of big time athletes like Kobe Bryant, a lot of baseball players are big on this because you can see it a million times before you actually even do it once.
Yeah, I mean, they call that, people have kind of tried to use it as like some of those law of the attraction things, in a sense. Like Conor McGregor, he's like, yeah, I see Aldo with his right hand tensed, I've visualised this fight, and it's kind of the same thing. So when he goes in there, he's seen all these different scenarios already, he's ready to react to it, each one. It's kind of, and like you said, it's the new, the electrons, is it electrons? That you fire down. Neurons. I said it. I was right first time. The neurons fire down, and obviously, so for him, when he's in that real situation, because he's visualized it so much, the neurons are reacting because it's familiar to them, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
So, how does what you're doing work within the MMA world? Like, how have you made it so sport specific to MMA?
So that's a good question. So basically, how we make it more sports specific. So because at the end of the day, I'm not a MMA technician. Like I'm not working on their grappling or their striking or anything like that. But how I can integrate some of those factors in so it has relevance is, for example, we'll use some of those like the lights, and this is how we get memory and thinking involved. We'll assign different combos to a different color light. Me or Phil will hold them up like in our hands like this, and say the blue light is one combo, red light's another. So when it comes on, they have to throw those strikes, and that way they're reacting quickly to the strikes when they happen. So now they're using working memory, they're using reaction, but as well using their striking combos. Or there's another tool I have, they're called strobe goggles. So they're like sunglasses kind of, but the lenses actually can blur your vision on and off. And I can set it at an easy level when you can see pretty clearly to difficult when you can barely see at all. And I'll actually simulate situations like one thing I pointed out before was with Phil, we were talking about it. I put the setting on his right eye being blinded and his left eye having minimal vision since he's a southpaw. So I wanted to simulate him being disadvantaged in cases, eye gets hit, you know what I mean? So we did different drills with the pool noodles, attacking him. He was blocking them off. So when Dustin fought Pettis, there was a similar scenario. I saw it, and it was like kind of uncanny, like how it carried over because we put him in that situation before. So that's how I kind of apply to fighting, because we don't want to go too technical because we're not trying to change his form, but we want to simulate some scenarios that we can cognitively get him reacting or thinking in a scenario that would be the fight. So that's one of the key examples, I think.
How did you get to working with Mark and Dustin?
Well, basically, this is a cool story. Me and Phil actually played high school football together down here in Deerfield Beach, Florida, not too far from the Miami area, South Florida area. So basically, we played on the same side. I was a safety. He was a linebacker, so he was the leader of the defense. So me and him had a cool relationship. We went off to different colleges, and we kept in touch across the years on and off. But it was actually, this is like, I cannot tell you a lie. I was actually on Instagram, and we've kept in touch throughout the years. So he knows what I've been doing, and I know what he's been doing. But for some reason, I hit him up out the blue and just said, hey, I got some things I want you to check out. Maybe you can use with your fighters. And he told me that Dustin and him were talking about incorporating a mental aspect this night before. And I had no idea. This was just random. I hit him up. And then when he said come through on Monday, it was just good timing because UFC on Fox was there. And we got to show this stuff to the world, and the whole world got to see our methods, so it was a pretty cool experience. So me and Phil go way back to, 10 years ago I graduated. So yeah, about 10, 11 years. So he helped me out, putting me on implementing with his fighters, and a lot of them are taking to it. So we got about 3 more guys coming on, trying it out. So hopefully we can get it to a point where this is like a staple in the industry,
Yeah, a game changer almost. Big game changer. I mean, Phil's such a cool guy. honestly, like he's helped me out loads with guests from podcasts, and like with Mark, he like messaged me like, get Mark on your show, man, make it happen, contact him, like get chatting. And I was just like, thanks, bro. Like you're always just willing to help. So
Oh,
he's
he's a
he's
great guy.
he's a cool guy, man. So how do you think like the top athletes have this how do you think the top athletes have this like psychological edge? Like, do you think they're born with it, or is it maybe just a rough upbringing, different scenarios? Do you think like to be a great champion, you're just born with that psychological aspect?
Well, I'll say yes and no because, like with the physical capabilities, obviously, like let's use physical terms first to break it down. Some people are born stronger, faster, taller, bigger, whatever it may be. But anyone can get stronger. Anyone can get faster to their extent. So I think with the psychological capacity, it's the same way. You're born with a certain baseline. So some people are higher than others starting out. But this is where the old saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. This is where that comes in because let's say I have this mental toughness, this reserve of just resilience, but then I get to the point that I'm just like whatever with it, and then there's a person who just wants it more, and we've seen this happen. And if you want it more and you put in the effort and you persevere, you can be someone who is quote unquote ahead. But just like anything else, it can be trained. Like I always like to say, you don't have to be sick to get better. You can get better now. It's like waiting for a car. You don't wait till the car breaks down and say, let me get an oil change or let me do the spark plugs or something. No, you do that stuff hopefully beforehand, and that same thing we're doing here. We're getting preventative maintenance. We're getting them ready before it gets to the point, because it's like a muscle. I cannot just say, oh, we got to fight next week. Okay, let's do some mental stuff. Nah, it has to be developed, and we progress just like a strength program. We progress week to week, and they get more challenging. They get harder. I throw in more variables. I make the reaction times a lot quicker, so you don't have as much time to think. So it's the same concept of progressing, and that's what makes our program, I guess, very unique, that we integrate both applications of the physical and the mental together.
Going off on a sort of a different little tangent is, what do you think like about the effects of exercise on the brain? Like, do you know much in the sense of the science of what happens when you start to exercise and perform, and because like for me, I had depression for a while, or I was depressed, and I just started exercising, and suddenly I just felt stimulated and a lot better about myself and my appearance, and ever since then I haven't looked back. But I don't really know like the science behind why maybe that happens, like what happens to the brain.
Well, there is a lot of science on exercise in the brain, and basically what you saw with your ordeal is basically the brain gets reshaped with different neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which, to put it simple, dopamine's for pleasure, feel good, and serotonin is like the police of your brain. They make things that are running smoothly. So when you exercise, these actually get flooded through your body to actually increase how you feel. That's why you get some feelings like runner's high, they call it, or euphoria, because now your brain's operating on a more balanced level without having to use different pharmaceuticals, which I'm not knocking pharmaceuticals. They have a role, but this is a way to do it without having to compensate for other parts of your hormones and stuff. So the brain has a lot of benefits from exercise, and that's just one of them. There's other things such as memory, because that word you talked about, BDNF, I won't get too deep on that, but that actually helps your brain cells, your neurons get stronger and harder to damage. That's why like they have research with Alzheimer's patients who exercise regularly and they don't have as bad symptoms. And this is something I haven't really thought too much about, but considering fighters take a lot of blows to the head, there's a lot of relevance there with training the brain, because down the road, things like Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, these are things that they look at CTE with contact sports. So there's definitely a lot of relevance there in a non-like performance way, but just the overall health for the fighters.
Touches on my next point is, what do you think like the effects of fighting have on the brain? Because obviously I know in the NFL there was like that study to do with obviously the impact they have and the concussion, and I think Alan Shearer's like an English football player over here, and he's doing a documentary on like heading the ball leads to like concussion, which can cause like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. So he's doing a little documentary, but I kind of wanted your take on sort of fighting, getting hit in the head all the time, how much effect does it have on the brain?
Well, it has a lot of effects because I'm not an expert in neuroscience and that aspect, but I do know a little from what I've read. And the brain, or human brain, that is not made really to take any kind of impact. So, being a guy who played contact sports like football, I'm a proprietor of it. So I've been on that side, and I won't say like, oh, don't do it. Obviously, there's millions of dollars to be made in these industries, so they're not going to stop. But the brain basically, even at a light contact, I forget the exact amount of G force, but even at certain contacts can cause some kind of impact and disruption in the brain. So you're talking about guys who are getting hit hard, they're much more higher than the average impact, whether it's fighting, football. So our brains are really not made to take that kind of hit because there's no protective layer between. For example, there's the woodpecker. I learned this on the movie Concussion actually with Will Smith, and it has their tongue actually wraps around through the back of their head and around their brain and gives it a thick layer of cushion. So when they peck the trees thousands of times a day, there's minimal damage. When we do it, when we hit our heads, it's like our brains in a jar of water and it's just bouncing all around the glass. So that's not good for us. And it releases like different proteins that actually do cause damage to the brains over time. That's why you see a lot of fighters who get dementia or Parkinson's. And now they can't make it a 100% direct link, but it definitely has a lot of impact. And that's why like you said, the studies are starting to show this stuff. So I guess I don't know how to say, can we stop it? Probably not. Getting hit in the head is inevitable in these sports, but maybe there's some ways we can help with the treatment of it with different means.
Yeah, I mean it's hard, like, because the flip side to that coin is there's people out there that, you know, I'd take a little bit of concussion to play in the NFL and earn, you know, millions of dollars a year, like, and also it'd make me happy. Do you know what I mean? Like, make me happier than how I am, like, in my current situation. The same as if I was a world class MMA fighter. You know, they're training and going to the gym every day and working out and sparring. That's like your sense of happiness there. And if you decided to take that away from people because it's too risky, because it causes concussion and certain things have been linked to it, you know, where do you draw the line? I think as humans we have to make our own choices to an extent and understand that, yeah, this could be, you know, a reaction to what I'm doing now. Is it worth it? I think that's probably the best way to weigh up that situation.
There's always a cost benefit, you know, ratio to it, the good versus the bad scenario, you know. So that's something I guess we all gotta face, or anyone in that field has to face at some point.
So how could you link your methods into, say, personal training, for example? Because I'm assuming they're quite like interchangeable. You can kind of use them in MMA and then use them in personal training, but how would it change at all? Or?
Well, yeah, actually, the other side of our business, we actually have a facility down here in South Florida that we do group personal training, and the benefits are pretty much, I wouldn't say exactly the same, because with the personal training, the fitness is a little more aspect, but we're still doing drills that require you to think and react while moving. But with the MMA fighter, it's more so the thinking's more emphasized. There's still movement. They're still moving left, right, up, down, turning, running, sprinting, but it's not to the extent to, you know, be the workout. Versus with the group personal training, the extent is to be the workout while doing training. So we're doing like traditional stuff like deadlifts, squats, but we still have the light systems and different cognitive drills we implement between sets or in sets. So it definitely has a carryover because, like I said, the brain has a lot of effects from exercise. So doing that alone, exercising, is good. And then when we add in our methods with the brain training while exercising, it can only increase it better.
I'd be interested to know, kind of a random experiment, but say like burpees, for example. Someone does burpees whilst trying to solve a maths problem, and someone does just burpees. Which one would burn more calories? Do you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't that be kind of like, oh, well, you know, this psychological aspect, or even touching the colours or whatever, touching is it fit lights? Is that what you call them?
Yeah, fit lights. That's what they're called.
Even like touching that, doing like red and then going down, doing a burpee, and then blue or whatever, like, and remembering the colours or so on. Would you burn more calories doing that than you would just doing normal burpees?
Well, the calories, I think, probably wouldn't be, if any difference, probably wouldn't be too significant, but it would be the fact that from the cognitive standpoint that you would have to use your mind versus just doing a regular burpee because exercise, like I said, exercise has benefits, but the more the exercise requires like thinking, like even taking outside the thinking part, like directly. Let's say you know how they use a lot of the agility ladders. A lot of fighters use those too, and Phil used those a lot with the fighters. That helps with cognition because if I just said run a straight line, it doesn't take much thinking to go straight. That's why treadmills are probably the worst form of cardio in my opinion, especially for brain training. But if you do an agility ladder, you're going left, you're going right, you're going side to side, you're crisscrossing your feet, and that actually takes different cognition to do those specific movements. So something simple is that. So I think that could burn more calories in that sense of you're doing more technical movements, you know what I mean, versus just running straight.
Yeah. So you was a professor, am I right?
Yeah, I work adjunct at a local college down here in South Florida.
Is that what you're doing as well as your side business, or you used to do that and you've?
Well, basically, it kind of time I started the business officially about a year ago, but I've been doing the background research, like I said, for the past 3 years, all doing. And I got the adjunct position teaching total wellness, which incorporates like learning about exercise science, stress management. So it basically mirrors a lot of what I'm already doing, and that's the beauty of it. I use my classes actually as like a sample size population so I can see what truly is considered fast when I do these drills with like Dustin or Mark or Santiago, because it's one thing, that's where it goes back to data. If I see a time, unless it's standardized, it means nothing because 40-yard dash in football, we know anything under 4 seconds is considered elite speed. But if I say you did 0.3 seconds average on an impulse drill, it really means nothing unless we have something to compare it to. And what we saw was on average, my class, they were getting in the high 4s and 5 half a second basically reaction on just one drill that requires like using your hands to quickly touch the light. Red means don't touch, green means do touch. And they were getting about the high 4s, low 5s. And the fighters, all the fighters are doing sub 4. And Dustin actually stood out the most. He did at his fastest touch is like a quarter of a second. So that means his hands are moving amazingly fast. And if you see any of my videos on like Instagram or anything, you can see his hands are blurry. Like you really don't see him as he moves them. And that can carry over a lot with fighters because they have to be able to move their bodies in efficient, quick ways.
That's what like Bruce Lee apparently used to be like. He'd move so quick that they had to slow down the film.
Oh yeah.
His hand speed was just like electric, and maybe that's maybe he was sort of ahead of his time in the sense of performance. Mark's hand speed as well. I commented on one of your Instagram videos. I think I was like,
yeah.
Mark's hand speed is just like snap, like so quick. I'm thinking, what the fuck?
Mark is like a beast in the physical as well. Like I see him doing his drills with Phil, and I see him doing drills with me, and he's just fast across the board. And this come from a guy who was a track athlete, so speed is king. And I'm one of those guys that I get up and excited about that type of stuff. Like being fast is definitely important, but accuracy is definitely first too, though. We work on, you got to be accurate but fast too, and that's a trade-off a lot of people don't get. Like some of the fighters, some of the students, they weren't getting the accuracy but they were fast, or they're getting the accuracy but they weren't fast. We need both. We need to be fast, need to be accurate.
So what did you do your thesis on for your psychology?
So basically I did mine on how we can, it probably set the foundation for what I'm doing now. This was back 4 years ago. So I basically did on how mental training can be periodized like strength training. So for those who don't know what periodization is, that's basically when you say one phase of training, you work on just building muscle. The second phase, you might work on just building maximal strength. And then the last phase, you might work on being quick and explosive. So that's how we do it with strength training. So my theory was, can we do this with mental training? And there was very little research, and I was surprised. So I was kind of excited because it made me kind of like on the forefront of it. And I talked with some of the leading experts in it, and they were like actually intrigued by what I'm doing now. So basically, we found that integrating the mental skills in a periodic way, like saying we start off with just simple things like let's getting their reaction time simple and slow without any distractors, just see where they're at. Then we move it up to adding in auditory distractions, making them have to memorize numbers while doing it, or visual distraction, making them have to look at, like you saw on my Instagram with the numbers on the whiteboard, and they have to decipher those while still reacting. And then it gets to the last part when they have multiple cues with their one arm has to touch this side while the other hand has to touch that side, while the foot's touching this side. So it's it's basically increasing like you increase weight throughout the months. We increase the intensity. So my thesis was basically on that with just regular mental skills, and then that set the foundation for what I'm doing with the athletes now.
You should write a book.
I should turn. Yes, you should, made a good point. I should turn that into a book. It was like 40 something pages, so I could edit it maybe. So hey, make some extra money, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And you can add a few bits on that you might have like learnt, over a period of time now that you've seen in other studies. It could all help, But I'm all out of questions. We're going 45 minutes. It's gone quick, in my opinion.
Really? Wow.
It goes quick, doesn't it? I look and I'm like, fucking hell, where's the time gone? But yeah, cheers for coming on. Is there anything like you'd like to add? Promote yourself, your channels and stuff like that now, far away if you want.
Oh yeah, so you can find me on Instagram under Mr. Mental Muscle. That's same thing on Twitter, Facebook, and our company is under The Mind Body One. And that's also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So you can follow us on there. You can see a lot of updates with our athletes, with our different populations. Work with drug addiction centers, work with students in high school, elementary school. So we work with a variety of populations. I'm actually working on next step. Fingers crossed, is getting the military and police force involved, because they definitely have a big need for this. And there are already a lot of programs that are out there for mental and cognitive training, but I feel ours could bring a big aspect to it.
Cool, man. Well, I'll end this and we'll chat off camera quick anyways. Thank you for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've blown my mind with certain things. I'm going to have to go do some research now. And I probably sounded like an idiot half the time.
Oh, nah. You're actually on point with some of you didn't know the wordings for them, but you were saying a lot of concepts that I paid thousands of dollars to learn. So who's the fool here?
Yes. All right, cool. Right, let's end this.